Hello, everyone. Phil Turek here, and I have exciting news for myself. Almost 2 years ago, I approached the local AIAA chapter, American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, about presenting my ideas. And they said, well, okay, write an article, give a talk. Well, I finally put together a talk, and from that derived an article. And went up to the Planetary Defense Mini Conference this past Saturday and told them, okay, I'm finally ready. And they said, fine. And they want me to, submit a blurb, an abstract, so they can announce it and schedule it probably for late August or sometime in September. So I'm excited. And the planetary conference was great, learned a lot, particularly results from the DART mission and some modeling by Livermore Labs. It was a fine conference, but my focus today is okay, tomorrow I'm going to go off to the library and I'm going to work on just putting together the blurb that goes off to announce my talk and what it's about and, images from it, advertising it, that little piece that needs to be done, the abstract. For today, what I had done is I interacted with a friend, Mike, and tried to summarize my whole concept originally in 30 seconds, but that didn't happen. So 5 minutes. So what I've done is I've edited the PowerPoint the huge one that I've prepared to talk to the IAA, where I typically will have at least an hour to make my presentation, spill it a little bit longer, hour, 15 minutes maybe. So, whew, I've got my many slides. And what I've done just now is trim it down, started formatting it a little bit, and I want to see if I can just present it in 5 minutes. Now, I'm certain I haven't rehearsed this yet. So this is going to be the rehearsal of trying to get it to within 5 minutes. And then in this episode, I'll try to trim it down in real time and get it to a 5 minute mark. So here we go. In the future, there will be a vibrant, self-sustaining human civilization on Mars. The high road to Mars is one built on a foundation of gracious professionalism, the bedrock ethos of the first robotics competition. The earthbound dreamers of today, who are working to open the high road to a future Martian civilization, are the ancestors of tomorrow's Martians. I'm Phil Turek, one such ancestral Martian. Look at what I'm trying to do by creating simulated Martian cultural ambassadors to act as positive social influencers to somewhat depolarize society here in the United States. Imagine how much even better it would be if the United States were to bring real Martian ambassadors here. Martians on Earth, a 5 minute summary where I just started the clock. Nice. Originally, a long time ago, someone asked me to do something to make the world a little better. And I came up with a three-phase plan using Mars as a tool for making social changes on Earth. So the image, and this was created by a student for me many years ago, almost 35 now, where we take students and we give them experiences and have them go out and explore the world and become really good at it. And eventually, the best ones who get scholarships and go on and are prepared are sent off to Mars, where they learn about Mars and establish cultural values. But then the important part is they come to Earth and they act as ambassadors. And they share with us their new insights that they've gained by returning to Earth and seeing things from their changed perspective. So that was the original plan. It was fine. I included a part. It was like a jigsaw puzzle. So it had environmentalists and it had students and it had Congress and it had retiring NASA people involved, each in their own little piece. And so here's again a slide from that original idea that said, okay, when the Martians, people who've lived on Mars long enough that we can call them that, come to Earth, really returning to Earth, they'll probably be quarantined at first, and yet we want to expose them to the US. So originally it was to have train routes, and they would be put on an Amtrak uh, route. Congress would debate what routes to have them explore on. And so off on the right, I've got images created by two different classes of students over the years back in 2021. Periods 2 and period 5, they each selected what route they would propose, if they were running Congress. And then a little image showing how families could travel on these routes and have their own input. Okay, so that was original EMA. Well, over 3 decades, the government has changed so much, and our culture has changed so much that that's too impractical to think of a friendly competition between major political parties in our current government. So recently, there's been stuff influencing me that says, what is good government? Good government is like a good gardener, someone who cares about the new growth and getting it started, giving it a decent shot at being successful, and then for the old growth, it's trying to take over the world, figuratively, maybe literally for corporations and such, uh, pruning them and confining them so that they don't dominate too much. So, in terms of government, that means uh, giving fair shots to businesses so they aren't discriminated against as they try to start up. And then for established businesses, preventing monopolies, basically. So that's good government. We don't currently have it at the moment like we used to have. So another thing that's influenced me these days is everyone your enemy? Like Malthus had predicted, where we're competing for finite resources? Or is everyone like your friend, like Robert Zubrin advocates, that says, look, the more people you have, the more inventors you have. The more inventions you have, the better the quality of life is for everyone. Stuff that wasn't a resource becomes a resource. Is water a resource? Well, not if it's a swamp, right? But it is if it's not a swamp. So we use our creativity to invent wealth for everyone. And so everyone is your friend, not your enemy. And to have that creativity, you need to have freedom to go with it. If you are in an authoritarian regime, you don't get those creative juices flowing. So we need to be an open democracy. We need to have liberty and justice for all. That's what we need. Now, in the U.S., the civic narrative has been our ideals are from the Declaration of Independence: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But there's always been another viewpoint about what our narrative is, and that is no, we're this federation of these different American nations, and each has slavery as its foundation, or is going their own separate ways. Maybe not every one of them has slavery as their foundation, but some of them do. So here's a map made by Nationhood Lab of what these 11 American nations look like geographically today. And it's interesting. I've talked about it many times. There was a civil war between Yankeedom and Deep South over the issue of slavery. It still hasn't really gone away, right? So here's the good news. Even though these are separate American nations with different cultural values and everything else, the recent study, and I see I'm at 5 3/4 minutes already. The recent study shows that most Americans still want to uphold and strive towards the ideals of the Declaration of Independence. So here's kind of updated. What are we striving for as our nation? What's our narrative? Well, we're not defined by being a tribe that excludes anyone who's not like us. Oh, that's a Muslim mayor of New York City as a candidate. Oh no, let's deport him. Okay, serious yesterday's or this morning's headlines. All right. We, as U.S. citizens, have rights to survive, to not be tyrannized. Okay, so that's it. Now, my big idea is noting that we need to address changes, that my ideas of 35 years ago won't work today. What can we do today? Well, we don't have a Martian colony to reflect on and show us what our better selves are like. And there's not one coming really soon enough. So, what I propose is an intra-national design competition based on my experience that says, okay, every year we have this competition. It starts off with high school students. They figure out what Martian cultural values should be like. And it's for a community of at least 53 people and blah, blah, blah. Okay, who should settle Mars? Well, basically, different societies are what I propose. Otherwise, it's just not the right foundation culturally. And here's a list of my suggested societies. A big one for me is the Future Farmers because they have so many people. The first three have 20,000 people. The Future Farmers have I have 1 million people in the US. And then the AIAA is where I am trying to go to as the overall coordinator of all this stuff. And here's a population curve that says, if we do 2 week cycles and stuff, we can get something going. I recently asked Chat to generate an image that shows, people living and playing on Mars. And so here's one image. But in this competition, we try to draw out positive traits from each of the 11 American nations, maybe add to it, internationally a bit, but mostly trying to get the United States to go in the same direction. Different cuisines. Scoring can be done by an organization that scores governments for a living. And so here's the important part I have, and we're already at almost 9 minutes. I have three proposals that I want to pitch. First, that we do this competition as a small scale thing. They design a city on Mars just for that population. Second is if they get a little more ambitious, that we actually design an analog community somewhere on Earth, probably United States, where we could field test this sort of cultural values. And then the really desirable actual project is to actually field test, try to germinate Martian cultural values in this little community, maybe have them virtually connected somehow to the population at large, but at least have it laser focused on this one group and play it out, roll it over a season, and then learn from it. So small project, design something on Mars. Medium project, design an analog on Earth. Large project, actually carry it out as an experiment, so I guess a social experiment here on Earth. You could use abandoned school buildings or underground salt mines. Here's a reason why this would be useful. Some conservative who I respect says, look, if you want to change the way our nation is going today, it's a multi-step process, and it begins with a shift in values. So instead of looking at immigrants as being poisoning our blood, like Malthus would have you believe, view them the way Zubin would advocate. This says, look, these are resources. Everyone has brains, okay, different levels, but they could be educated. They could be, if they're put into a free environment, then they can be innovative. And any improvement, any innovation made anywhere on this planet is now shared everywhere on this planet, almost the same day, right? So, first, shift in values. Second, redefining our moral mission. So, we had the Gettysburg Address done by Lincoln. Now we need something that's sort of like a Martian cultural address that says, we want to actually engage in nation building. Here's the ideals that we would like our descendant nation on Mars, civilization on Mars, to have as cultural values. Okay. Third, civic renaissance. So we have things that are springing up today as a result of ICE raids in LA. We now have community groups that go in and say, "Oh, your breadwinner was disappeared. We're gonna take care of you short term, at least this way, that way." Now, that's as far as what my project could do, but at least it gets us through those first three steps by the simulated analog Martian community. I'm at 11 minutes. And then, you know, the nation would have to go on from there and say, okay, you know, what changes or improvements would we really want to make to the government or our politics here in the United States? And then uh, life is good. Okay, so last image, again, AI generated that shows this community on Mars, and I leave it at that. So I'm going to say I'm shutting this off. That's 12 minutes, 42 seconds. I probably should write that down someplace. Hmm. Yeah. Here's where I'm going to put it. 12 minutes, 42 seconds. Way too long. So I'm going to pause this entire recording, edit it, and then do another run through. Okay, it's a couple of minutes later. I've reduced a couple of slides. Probably not enough, but here we go. Three, two, one. Hi, Phil Turek here. I'm trying to do a 5-minute summary of my entire Mars project. Here we go. So, a long time ago, someone asked me to make the world better, and I came up with this idea that we could use Mars as a tool for social change. That if we have a focus on getting the best people to go from Earth to Mars, and they learn about this, new place, and they develop their own new cultural values. They develop a new perspective for looking at what life is like back on Earth, and then have them come back to Earth and share with us their changed perspective. Okay, that was the original plan, and part of it involved having Congress debate what routes the Martians would take when they came to Earth. A Martian being someone from the United States or from Earth who's lived on Mars long enough, at least 4 years, let's say, so that we can call them Martians. And up here we have a couple of examples of students saying, if I were Congress, here's the route I would pick. And as you can see, it's trying to have a friendly political rivalry between different political parties in the U.S. And families could be taking the Amtrak routes for summer vacation and having their own discussions about, oh, we think this should be included when, the Martians should definitely see this when they come back to Earth. Okay, it doesn't work anymore because in the 3 decades plus since then, our government has changed so much. It's so polarized. We're so divided now. We're not really even an open democracy. We're going towards a transition away from open democracy. And so I've been inspired lately by what is a good government? A good government is like a good gardener, someone who cares about, let's say, small businesses, having them get a fair chance at getting established and growing. And then, like a good gardener, prevents the monopolies of dominating the market so much by mature, established growth. Okay? So a big driver is how do you view other human beings? So in 1800, Thomas Malthus, famously said, everyone is your enemy. You're competing with them for finite resources. We're going to run out of coal." And today we have Robert Zubrin, who has a totally different viewpoint that says, no, the more people there are, if you educate them, if you give them freedom to innovate, the more inventions there are. The more inventions there are, the more natural raw materials become natural resources for the betterment of humanity. And therefore, everyone is your friend. So, how does that apply to, let's say, immigration? Okay, well, analysis would say immigrants are poisoning our blood because really we have to, you know, share our limited resources with them. And Zubin would say, just like on Mars, there's a tremendous need for labor that we don't have. There's a labor shortage on Mars, and immigrants are our friends, particularly if we can, train them, give them a, a hierarchy of needs that says they're safe, they can, learn. Okay, so the United States ideally says we go with the Declaration of Independence. I'm almost at 4 minutes. But as I've tried to point out, research shows we're actually 11 different distinct American nations, each with our own cultural values. Good news is we still value the ideals of the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, even after all the trouble that we're going through today. So I propose a competition carried out first by high school students to define a Martian civilization. So nation building, but what are the ideals we would want it to be like? And what kind of a population? So I have ideas about that. And initial demographics about this many people, this kind of community to start off with. And what I want in this competition is to draw the best features from each of the different American nations and maybe make it a bit more international so it's not just the US. But pick a trait or include cuisine, which is part of your cultural identity, right? And come up with a Martian civilization, cultural values that blends this together or tolerates it, respects it, has all the positive features that we would like it to have. And then in this competition, you have it scored by like a group that their business is to score governments. And so I'm at 5 minutes and a half. Okay. So I'm proposing that for the AIAA that they do this in like 3 levels of involvement. The first is just to have a competition on paper, and it's similar to other competitions that have been taking place over the years. The second level of involvement is to actually design where could we field test this someplace in the United States, preferably like on Earth. Where could we actually set up a little trial Martian community and germinate its cultural values over a field season and learn from it? And then what I really want is for them to, bite the bullet and say, wow, let's go actually establish this proposed analog Martian civilization somewhere during the field season and see how it works and then learn from that and iterate. Great. That's the big thing I want. So either paper design, another paper design about, here's what it would cost, where we could do it, what resources we need, or let's actually do it using one place or another. Okay. So all of this, I'm at 6 minutes, almost 7, is trying to help our current government, which is in transition. If you want to change course, there are many steps involved with it. My proposal could help get us through the first 3, particularly if we make this a very public activity. And then after that, it's the nation that would have to, work on steps 4, 5, and 6. Okay, so that's my proposal in a nutshell. And I'm looking at the time. It's 7 minutes and 20 seconds. Thank you. Still too long. I want to get this down to 5 minutes. So once again, I'm going to pause the recording, edit this thing, try to shorten it a little bit more, and try again. All right, so here we are, just I don't know, 5 minutes later or so. I guess I could put it that way. And I've trimmed a little bit more, and here we are. I'm gonna try one more time. 3, 2, 1. All right, Phil Turek here. I'm trying to do a 5-minute summary of my entire Mars project that I've worked on for a long time now. Originally, someone asked me to do something to improve life on Earth, and I came up with this idea that said I could use Mars as a tool for social change here in the United States, my focus. And the idea is we take our best and our brightest and we prepare them, learn all about the US, and then or the world, and we send them off to Mars and they live there 2, 4 years, something like that, enough so that we can call them Martians and that they have a changed perspective. It's like going off to college and then coming home. So the important part is they come home, they come back to the United States, and they use their changed perspective to help guide us in seeing ourselves and what improvements we could make in our own lives. Part of this plan was having Congress involved and having them select different train routes used by the initial Martians when they, first arrived back on Earth. And for example, the two maps on the right are what my students simulated being Congress saying, okay, let's do this route or let's do that route. And you've got families involved with, the decision making and advocating one route or another as well. So it was part of a friendly rivalry of major political parties as part of the whole jigsaw puzzle of making this thing work. Great. Well, after all these years, we're too polarized for that to work right now. It's a winner take all mindset, which is horrible and counterproductive. So our government is actually changing. Good government is one that acts like a good gardener. A government that regulates not too much, but enough to encourage small businesses to grow and the economy to grow from the bottom up, and then prevent major established growth from monopolizing the market and taking over the world in a too much of a controlling way. Okay, so that's good government. Right now, yeah, we're in transition. So I want to share this philosophy of two different people. There's Thomas Malthus in 1800 who said, everyone is your enemy. There's only so much coal in the world and we're going to run out and you have to fight with your neighbors and take the coal away from them. Otherwise, you won't have enough. On the other hand, we've got Robert Zubin on the right, modern guy who says, no, 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 you got it all wrong. There's no natural resources. There's only natural raw materials, and it's creative ingenuity that invents a resource. So land wasn't a resource until, agriculture was invented. And everyone is actually your friend. If you give them a nurturing environment and you give them a little bit of education and a little bit of freedom, they will innovate. And anytime an invention is made anywhere on this planet, it's become useful everywhere on this planet, and the quality of life goes up for everyone. Clearly, we have a better quality of life today than we did in 1800, even though our population is much greater today than in 1800. Okay? Now, bad news. The United States is not just one nation indivisible under God with liberty and justice for all. We wish it were, but it's actually 11 major different American nations that are sometimes rivals with each other, competing. Sometimes they form alliances this way, that way. We've had a civil war between Yankeedom and Deep South, but it doesn't have to be this way. Overall, the nations want to live up to the ideals of the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. They're just frustrated that we aren't doing it yet. And so we're transitioning away from open democracy towards autocracy. Bad news, but that's not what the majority actually wants. So I propose a competition that tries to draw out the better features of the American nations and applies it on giving birth to a new nation, new civilization on Mars. So nation building, but someplace where there isn't anyone to wipe out in the process. So nation building on Mars. What are the better features of each of the American nations that we would like to integrate into a Martian cultural values? So the competition would be drawing forth the best parts of who we are. including cuisine, perhaps, because that's an important part of your cultural identity. And have the proposals created, this is by high school teams at first, actually scored by organizations whose business is to score governments. So I have three proposals for the AIAA to try to take on. First is just doing a high school competition on paper the way it's done with other organizations. Design a colony on Mars for 65 people, including 12 visitors. And then more ambitious is to say, okay, now tell us what it would take to create an analog Martian community somewhere on Earth where we could field test our Martian cultural values. Okay. And research, oh, you could use this building or this land. Here's a location. Here's how we could do the logistics to support the group over a field season. But what I really want is for the AIAA to actually bite the bullet and say, let's actually do it, where we field test a Martian community and try to germinate its cultural values over a field season and learn from that and be very public about it. Whew. Why? Because our government right now is transitioning towards authoritarianism. If you want to change course and go, towards something that's more like the ideals that most of us want, here's the steps you'd have to go through. And I'm at 6 minutes 40 seconds. I'm still too long, but my competition can get us through the first three steps, and that's a great foundation for making improvements to our own government over time. Our goal in life is to give birth not only to a better version of ourselves on Mars, but to improve who we are here on Earth. Great. Now I'm going to stop it right there and say, well, that was 7 minutes, 5 seconds. Problem is, 7 minutes and 5 seconds is not much shorter than 7 minutes and 20 seconds. So this was terrible, and I'm going to have to trim even more than I wanted to. So I'm going to pause it, try to get this down to 5 minutes. Okay, that one was a little bit longer of a break, probably more like about 10 minutes or so, 12 maybe. And I've trimmed out more things that I wanted to not trim out. But, I really want to try to get this down to 5 minutes. So let's see if we can do this again. Three, two, one. Hi, I'm Phil Turek, and I'm trying to summarize my entire Mars concept in just 5 minutes. Let's see if I can do it this time. All right. A long time ago, someone asked me to do something to make the world a better place. And I thought about it and came up with this three-phase plan that says, let's take the very best people we have and train them all about what we're like today, and then send them off to Mars where they can develop their own cultural perspective and have a more nuanced view of who we are and who we want to be. And then, most importantly, have those ambassadors come back to Earth and share their perspectives on who we are and, give us their insights about what tweaks and changes we might want to initiate within ourselves and encouragement, right? So a three-phase plan. Part of it was to have Congress involved and say, okay, when Martians, people who've been on Mars long enough, come to Earth, uh, where should we take them to reintroduce them to the United States where they originally grew up? And it was going to be Amtrak routes, and Congress would debate, let's do this route, let's do that route. And the problem is that Congress is no longer the way it was 35 years ago. It's so polarized and divisive today, we can't have a friendly rivalry between major political parties. Today it's winner take all. We're not an open democracy with equal representation. Now we're going towards an absolute or competitive authoritarian regime. Terrible. Okay, why so much change? Because we were never really one nation indivisible with liberty and justice for all. Research shows we're really a collection of 11 different American nations, each with its own cultural values and history. And, gosh, we're different. Good news is it's been established recently by research that overall, even these different American nations still aspire to the ideals of the Declaration of Independence and our U.S. Constitution. They're just kind of frustrated that we're not actually implementing it the way the words, speak. So here's the way we are the ideals that we still strive for today. And what I'm proposing is to do a competition to try to draw out the better features of our American nations as applied to nation building on Mars. If we could establish a Martian civilization, what cultural values would we like it to exhibit? Well, what are the best features from each of the different American nations? What's a favorable trait from Yankeedom and so forth? And what about cuisine as well? Okay, each American nation has its own cuisine that it identifies with as well. And if you have a Martian civilization, what are they choosing to incorporate? And it could be more than just the US, but I'm really focusing on the US because here's where the problems are that we can fix. Now, there does exist an organization that scores governments. Here's our scorecard for the US from several years ago, and it's below average. Okay, so I have three proposals for the AIAA. First is that we just do a high school based paper competition the way other organizations have done it over the years, uh, modeled like after Space Set from Anita Gale, who passed away last year. Okay, so for a community of like 65 people, including a dozen visitors. Medium project would be, okay, now why don't you do the research and show us where we could establish an analog Martian community somewhere on Earth? You know, who's got the land, who's got the logistics, who's got the what financial support would it take to do it? How do we, pull it off? And it could be based on expanding existing simulated Mars bases that are for only 6 people. How do you make something that's for a community, right? And then what I really want as a project is actual field testing it so that we could incorporate what we learn into changing the course of our own trajectory towards the ideals of a Martian civilization. Thank you. That was 5 minutes and 2.77 seconds. 5 minutes and 3 seconds. That's really close to 5 minutes. Mm, I think. Okay, I will. This is your fourth time listening to all this. And I would have liked to have dwelled on the very end a bit more. Let's see if I just go like this. Dwelled on the very end a bit more and have it as a more mm, closing finale there. But I don't think you want to listen to this a fifth time. So I'm going to make the claim that it fits into 5 minutes, although it's not exactly fitting into 5 minutes. But I will go through and probably rehearse it one more time on my own, not bother recording it for you guys, which is just myself, I know, and say, okay, I made it. And tomorrow, based on this core, that's what I'm going to work on for doing the advertisements, the blurb that goes out to the AIAA that says, "Here's the talk I want to give. This is what it's about," uh, and go from there. Get it? Got it? I think this is good enough. So, happy 4th of July and ciao.